Let's see. Other than that, so tonight we have Joe Lang. He is an engineer with the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. He's going to talk about some of the work that he's been doing since September, looking at the potential flood risk for some of the areas in and around the Cedar Creek fire. Also with us, hopefully, I haven't seen her yet. I'm thinking that she might be here. Maybe I just don't see her name. Robin Fox, she's a service hydrologist with the National Weather Service. She was on the previous presentation that we had a few weeks ago with Forest Service and others, but she'll kind of be giving a reminder on what some of the weather warnings and watches and what they mean, and you know, what kind of weather systems that we're looking at potentially for our area. And then also have Scott Van Hoff. He's with FEMA. He is the regional insurance specialist, so he can talk a little bit about the kind of homeowners insurance that is offered out there for folks that they may be facing, you know, potential flood risk and things of that nature. And then we'll have a Q&A session, and we'll go for a while on that, and hopefully we can get your questions answered. So. With that, I want to hand it over to Joe Lang and see if he can pop on here and give any more introduction for himself or get started with his presentation. Are you there, Joe?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine. Can't see you yet.
Okay.
Hey, there
how
you go.
about now? All right, great. And during my presentation, I am also going to have my camera off to try to help so that everybody's going to be able to see the presentation the best as possible. So here we go. And can someone please let me know if they can see the presentation?
I can. Looks
Great.
like it's coming through just fine.
Thank you very much. Again, my name is Joe Lang. I'm the state design engineer with the Natural Resources Conservation Service, or also called NRCS. And I'll be presenting on the post-fire flood risk assessment for the 2021 Cedar Creek fire. And to begin with, I'll kind of just briefly go over the process that we use, and then I'll go into more detail about the specific areas that we conducted the assessments on. So to begin with, the congressionally authorized Emergency Watershed Protection Program, which NRCS is authorized to implement, encourages the implementation of emergency measures after a natural disaster to help protect against imminent hazards to life and property. Through the EWP program and a sponsor partnership such as the Okanagan Conservation District, the NRCS can share the cost of remedial actions and provide technical assistance on private lands. So in the case of fires, or of the Cedar Creek fire, both the fire and floods apply to as natural disasters. NRCS determines eligibility for the EWP program by conducting assessments of site-specific locations for both pre-fire and post-fire conditions. This is done by first determining how much it could flood, then determining the extents of the flood, then determining the flood risk, and finally determining if the pre-fire to the post-fire flood risk is significantly higher. And this is a key eligibility factor for the EWP program, because only if there is a significant increase in life or property is it eligible. So with the post-fire risk assessments, there are 8 components used by NRCS, and as listed here. So since post-fire flood is not yet occurred, the assessment relies on hydrologic and hydraulic models to determine what could occur sometime in the future. These are some of the models that are used in a post-fire flood assessment. Wildcat 5 for hydrologic modeling, HEC-HMS for hydrologic modeling, and HEC-RAS for hydraulic modeling. Modeling is essential to predict the future events that could cause post-fire flooding. Therefore, it's important that we always keep in mind wise words by George Box, which are, essentially all models are wrong, but some are useful. Models are used to predict what could occur for a given set of conditions. Model precision and accuracy is dependent on using good models, skills, and data. Changes in conditions, that is, result in modeling uncertainties. With respect to post-fire modeling, some uncertainties are soil moisture, water repellent soils, rain and/or snow as the precipitation, the storm distribution. For example, does the rainfall occur at a constant rate during a storm, or does the bulk of it happen at the beginning, middle, or the end of the storm? Suspended solids or bulking, which is caused by ash after the fire and also other debris that can be picked up, such as soil particles and other types of objects. The terrain or the elevation, debris flows and/or landslides, and breach hydrology. With post-fire flooding, it's all about the rain. If it doesn't rain a lot in a relatively short amount of time and within the next few years, then there will be no post-fire flooding. There's always an uncertainty with post-fire flooding for if it will occur or not. Therefore, we must plan for the worst and hope for the best. Rainfall quantity is simply the depth of a rain during a specific storm. Storm duration is the period of time of the storm event. Storm distribution is the quantity or depth over the duration or the storm time. Intensity is the quantity or the depth over the increment of time. It's a portion of the storm distribution, such as a 15 minutes of a 1-hour storm. Probability is a chance of a storm occurring in any given year. The recurrence interval, or frequency, is the return period in years and is the inverse of the probability. A storm with a 4% probability has a 4% chance of occurring in any given year. And it could happen even in more than once in a given year. The recurrence interval for a 4% storm is the inverse of 0.04 or 25 years. It does not mean that the storm only occurs once in every 25 years. There are two types of storm events that are typical for the Cedar Creek area. These are convective or thunderstorms and coastal maritime frontal storms. Convective storms are modeled with a 1-hour duration and typically occur between May through September. Coastal frontal storms are modeled with a 24-hour duration and typically occur between October through April. For the Cedar Creek fire area, the 25-year 1-hour convective storm rainfall is about 0.8 of an inch, while the 25-year 24-hour coastal frontal storm has a rainfall depth of about 3 inches. It's important to note that we are now almost into November, and the chance of a convective storm is very unlikely until next spring. Therefore, the modeling results for the 1-hour storms would likely be less due to the changes in conditions between now and next spring. All 9 hydraulic models utilize a high-quality LiDAR dataset for elevations to develop the model surface terrain. The LiDAR dataset represents bare earth or ground surface conditions. For example, this is the LiDAR derived terrain for the Wilson Ranch Road area. There are 9 flood risk assessment areas for potential values at risk. These are the Wilson Ranch Road, the Looney Creek area, Davilar Drive, Alpine Valley Lane, Little Boulder Creek, Wolf Creek Road, Wolf Creek, Thompson Creek at Mugo Road, and Thompson Creek at South Blackjack Road. For the Cedar Creek fire, the assessment included 26 hydrologic models of 15 basins and 9 hydraulic models at specific areas of interest. 10 of these basins were modeled for both convective storms of 1-hour duration and coastal frontal storms of 24-hour durations. One basin consisting of 6 sub-basins, being Wolf Creek, was modeled for only the coastal frontal storm of the 24-hour duration. The enhancement ratio is the ratio of the post-fire peak flow to the pre-fire peak flow. As you can see, some of these enhancement ratios are very large, with the maximum being 156 at Davilar Drive for the 1-hour storm. However, as I will show later, this does not directly correlate to flood risk. This is the flood assessment zone for the Wilson Ranch and Freestone Lake Drive area. This is the pre-fire flood map for the 25-year 1-hour storm event with an estimated peak flow of 20 CFS for the Wilson Ranch Road area. As you can see here, all of the flow goes to the northeast towards the direction of Wilson Ranch Road. The water is indicated in light blue here. This is the post-fire flood map for the 25-year 1-hour storm event with an estimated peak flow of 55 CFS. So if we look at a specific site for Wilson Ranch Road, located at 22 Wilson Ranch Road, we can then reference it with a profile line, and it can be used for measurements at specific points. So for reference, at a distance of 23 feet, the depth for the pre-fire condition is about 0.1 feet. Using the same profile line, distance and reference in time, the velocity at this same point is approximately 1 foot per second. If we look at the post-fire with the same reference profile line, you can see that the flood depth is now increased to approximately 0.25 feet. and the post-fire velocity is approximately 1.8 feet per second. We then determined the flood risk. Both the pre-fire and post-fire depth velocity points are plotted on the flood danger level risk chart. So this chart is used. The blue symbol is for the pre-fire and the yellow symbol is the plotted point for the post-fire. In this example, the pre-fire depth is 0.1 feet and the velocity is 1.0 feet per second, which is plotted here at the blue point. The post-fire depth is 0.3 feet and 1.8 feet per second. The flood danger level for the pre-fire is in the low danger zone. The flood danger level for the post-fire is also in the low danger zone. Since the pre-fire and the post-fire flood danger levels are the same, there is not a significant increase in risk. It's important to note, though, that there is a risk to flooding for both the pre-fire and the post-fire conditions, but not at a significant increase. For this example, then, it is not eligible for the EWP program because there is not a significant increase in risk. If we move on then to the Looney Creek area, this is the pre-flood map for the 25-year 1-hour storm event with an estimated peak flow of approximately 25 CFS. This is the post-fire flood map for the 25-year 1-hour with an estimated peak flow of approximately 800 CFS. This post-fire flood map for the Looney Creek alluvial fan illustrates how the flow is distributed throughout most of the alluvial fan area. This wide distribution affects a large area, but it helps reduce both the depth and the velocity, which in turn reduces flood risk. If we look at a specific site here on the Looney Creek, and then we plot the outcomes for that site, which for the pre-fire has a 0.7 feet of depth with 0 feet per second velocity, and the post-fire with a 2.2 feet of depth, but a velocity of 0.3 feet per second. So even though the site is flooded, the flood danger levels are both in the low danger zone for the pre and post fire. So at this specific site, there is not a significant increase in risk. Therefore, the site is not eligible for the EWP program. This is the flood assessment zone for the Davalar Drive area. For this area, this is the pre-fire flood map with the 25-year 1-hour storm event, which is estimated at less than 1 CFS. And you can just barely see there's a little bit of blue line coming right through here. So there's almost no flow at the 25-year 1-hour pre-fire storm event. At the post-fire 25-year 1-hour, the estimated peak flow is approximately 30 CFS. As you can see from here, it's significantly more than what the pre-fire was. But if we see how that relates to risk, both the pre-fire and the post-fire are plotting in the low danger zone level for flood for the flood danger levels. Therefore, again, this site does not have a significant increase in risk and is not eligible for the EWP program. This is the flood assessment zone for the Alpine Valley Lane area. And this is the pre-fire flood map for the 25-year 1-hour storm event, which is approximately equal to 2 CFS. This is the post-fire flood map for the 25-year 1-hour storm event, which has a peak flow of approximately 175 CFS. If we look at a site, at a specific site, approximately here at 34 Timber Lane, the post-fire flood depth is only at about 0.2 feet. The pre-fire, there was no flow or velocity, no depth or velocity, but the post-fire, there was a 0.2 feet of depth with a velocity of 2.6 feet per second. Again, both flood danger levels are the same, low danger zone. Therefore, it again is not a significant increase in risk, and the site is not eligible for the EWP program. This is the flood assessment risk zone for the Little Boulder Creek area. This is the pre-fire flood map for the 25-year 1-hour storm event with an estimated peak flow of 180 CFS. The same area now with the post-fire 25-year 1-hour with a estimated peak flow of 2,095 CFS. And if we look at a specific site, here indicated by the kind of the pink line, the profile line, and then we take the measurements of the pre and the post, there was no flow at that, their flow depth or velocity. So the pre-fire is at 0. The post-fire depth was approximately 0.6 feet with a velocity of 2.5 feet per second. Both flood danger levels are in the low danger zone, and therefore there's not a significant increase in risk, and the site is not eligible for the EWP program. This is the flood assessment zone for the Wolf Creek Road area. It's adjacent to the south of Jeffrey Lane and the Drippling Spring Road, which is across the river. This is the 25-year 1-hour pre-fire flood map with a peak estimated flow of 15 CFS. This same area with the post-fire has an estimated flow of 315 CFS. If we look at a specific site as indicated with the pink profile line, and then plot the results on the flood level risk, we can see that both the pre-fire and post-fire again plot in the low danger zone, and therefore is not a significant increase in risk, and the site is not eligible for the EWP program. Then we move to Wolf Creek. Wolf Creek has a drainage area of approximately 39 square miles or over 25,000 acres. It's physically impossible for a convective or thunderstorm to rain in this large area all at one time. Therefore, only the 24-hour storm was used. There are 5 subbasins used in the assessment for the entire Wolf Creek Basin. This is the flood assessment zone for the Wolf Creek area. And as you can see from this image, Wolf Creek has a very large alluvial fan. This is the pre-fire flood map for the 25-year, 24-hour storm event with an estimated peak flow of 1,320 CFS. Wolf Creek Reclamation District can divert up to 30 CFS between October 1st and July 1st, and up to 13 CFS between July 1st and September 30th. The maximum of 30 CFS is only about 2% of the pre-fire 25-year, 24-hour peak flow. Therefore, the diversion flow was not excluded from the analysis. So the full amount here was used to route down through the floodplain. This is the post-fire flood map for the 25-year, 24-hour storm with an estimated peak flow of 3,700 CFS. As you can see along the top here, the Wolf Creek Road acts somewhat as a dike and keeps water from moving further to the north. If we look at a specific site, as indicated here with this pink profile line, and then plot the results on the flood risk assessment map, both flood danger levels plot in the low danger zone, and therefore there's not a significant increase in risk, and it's not eligible for the EWP program. If we look at another one, indicated at the location of this pink profile line, and then plot that onto the flood danger level chart, both the pre and the post fire again plot in the low danger zone. And again, it's not a significant increase in risk and therefore not eligible for the EWP program. And if we look at one more, again, with the pink line indicating for the profile line, and plot those results on the flood danger level chart. And again, both the pre-fire and the post-fire plot within the low danger zone. Therefore, it is not a significant increase in risk, and the site is not eligible for the EWP program. If we look at the Thompson Creek, specifically the Mugo Road area, this is the Mugo Road area from Thompson Creek, showing the 25-year, 1-hour pre-fire flood map that was estimated at 70 CFS. This is the same area for the post-fire with an estimated peak flow of 450 CFS. If we look at a specific site, as indicated with the pink profile line, and then plot the results on the flood danger level chart, both the pre and the post-fire plot in the low danger zone. Therefore, it is not a significant increase in risk and not eligible for the EWP program. If we look at another site, indicated with this pink profile line, and then plot those results onto the flood danger level chart. Again, the pre-fire and the post-fire plot within the low danger zone. Therefore, there is not a significant increase in risk, and the site is not eligible for the EWP program. And if we look at the South Blackjack Road area of Thompson Creek, this is the pre-fire 25-year 1 hour with still the same peak flow for Thompson Creek of 70 CFS. And if we look at this particular residence here, and now with the post-fire, neither the pre or the post-fire has the flood reaches this location. Therefore, there is no increase in flood risk, and the site is not eligible for the EWP program. So then moving to our summary. And what does this assessment tell us? Well, to begin with, there could be significant increases in runoff from post-fire effects if it rains a lot in a relatively short amount of period of time and within the next few years. Many areas could be flooded. However, many of those areas could be flooded in pre-fire conditions. Lives may be at risk from flooding and debris flows. If you have a house located in a floodplain such as an alluvial fan, your life may be at risk. This is true for both pre-fire and post-fire conditions. However, none of the areas have significantly higher risk to loss of life from post-fire conditions with respect to flooding. Because of this, no assessed sites were determined to be eligible for the EWP program. So things that private landowners can do, even though that none of these sites were eligible for the EWP program. First off, make sure that you understand the specific flood risks at your property. Ask insurance agents about the FEMA post-fire flood insurance. Make sure that you understand what is and is not covered with the insurance. Understand how to get weather forecasts from the National Weather Service and learn what type of storms you may need to be concerned about that could cause flooding or debris flows. Develop an emergency action plan now. Don't wait until it starts raining. Plan what you will do, where you will go, and when you will do it. And then practice the plan with all family members. Remember, plan for the worst, yet hope for the best. And don't think that it can't happen because you've never seen it flooding at your house before. Don't wait until you hear the noise of the train, because there are no trains in that area. And if you wait until then, at that point, it may be too late. So with that, concludes my presentation, and I will turn it back over to Craig, and I believe that we will open it up for any questions at the end of the meeting.
Thanks, Joe. Really appreciate that. Yeah, we're going to do questions at the end. Next is Robin Fox from the National Weather Service.
Yes, hi there, Craig, and hello, everybody. I have a few slides I want to show, so let me get that switched over. Let's see here. Let's see. Not sure. There we go. There we go. Can everybody see my slides now?
Yep, they're showing up just fine.
All right. Perfect. Perfect. Okay, so welcome everybody. Good evening. My name is Robin Fox. I'm with the National Weather Service in Spokane, and I am the service hydrologist. And I'm here to talk about weather forecasts and warnings and where you can get that information. Now, to start out with, Okanagan County is part of the National Weather Service Spokane's county warning area. So the office in Spokane is responsible for all the forecasts and warnings for the area. And the staff is aware of how vast this county is and the challenging weather conditions that it can experience. And I want to point out that the National Weather Service has a twofold mission. Number one is to issue the weather and water watches and warnings for the protection of life and property. So we are looking for those severe and hazardous events, and we'll issue the watches and warnings for those events. Number two is issuing weather forecasts and taking weather observations for the area. So that is our second concern. But number one is the watches and warnings, and we work closely with our local, state, and federal partners to accomplish this. So the main concerns we're going to discuss tonight are the threats of heavy rain from thunderstorms and also those prolonged steady rain events that we see in the fall that Joe has outlined in his discussion. And another thing I want to point out is the best source for the National Weather Service forecasts and warnings is our webpage, which is weather.gov/Spokane. And I'll show examples later on how you can reach that. So we all know that not all storms are the same. Some storms may not bring much rain. They could be dry. They may have some lightning or some wind. Other storms can produce some rain, maybe some light sprinkles, or maybe let's say an inch of rain over 12 hours. And usually this doesn't lead to many problems. But it's those few troublesome storms that can lead to issues, especially when we see those high intensity rains. So let's say a half an inch of rain in an hour that are made out of big drops over steep terrain that are over recently burned areas. And those are the big concerns that we're keeping our eye on. So the National Weather Service watches and outlooks and our messaging will help people know when to anticipate these types of days and what could cause the most problems. So I got a chance to go and visit Cedar Creek and see the burned areas there early this fall. And I got to see the areas of concern firsthand and the areas susceptible that Joe outlined in his presentation. So areas that can expect more water in the river channels, these areas can expect more debris, more sediment, ash, and debris are going to be moving when we see rain come. But overall, I just want to stress that just like Joe mentioned, that some areas may see flooding and debris flows that have not seen it before due to the recent fires. And if you are near or downhill of these burn scars, you can plan for the unexpected because we're going to see a lot of sediment and a lot of ash moving from these burned areas. So there are some particular rain rates and intensities that the National Weather Service will use to monitor, not only for the thunderstorm events, but also these prolonged fall rain events. And we'll concentrate on the warmer times of the year. Starting now for those fall rains for the next few weeks before the snow flies and settles in. And then we transition to the more convective types of storms with those showers and thunderstorms in the spring and the summer months. And we do know that these events are all dependent on the location of the storms and the steepness of terrain. So ideally, we're looking at amounts that are a half an inch or less in an hour over a longer duration, an inch of rain in 2 hours. So here's some examples that we're talking about discussing debris flows and flash flooding. And when we're talking about debris flows, these are these fast moving landslides of dirt and mud that can come down these steep slopes and move into from those burned areas into the floodplains, and also it could impact some private residences as well. Flash flooding is more of the rapid onset of flooding, usually in less than 6 hours of time, and can cause a lot of debris and destruction as well, especially with the fast moving water that moves through the area. So the National Weather Service uses some unique terminology to describe the possible hazard threats, and it can be kind of confusing, especially knowing the difference between a watch and a warning. And we use these terms quite a bit on describing the upcoming hazards. Okay, so a watch is issued when conditions are favorable for hazardous weather. It's not occurring right now, but it has about a 50% chance or more of occurring. So it's just giving you the awareness that conditions are favorable for this to happen, but it's not happening at this time. A warning is issued when a hazardous weather event is occurring or imminent. So it's about to happen right now, and it threatens life and property. The probability is up there to 90 to 100%. So when you hear that there is a warning out for a particular weather event, you can pretty much be guaranteed that there is something that's going to be affecting life and property with this weather event. Now, other terms that we use include an advisory, which is a weather event that's occurring, but maybe more of a nuisance type of event. So with flooding, that'd be more ponding in fields and in low-lying areas. And we also use the term outlook, that describes a hazardous weather event that is possible, but it's in the long range. So maybe 3 to 7 days out in the future. So more specifically, when we're talking about flood watches versus flood warnings, the challenge is getting the word out on the possibility of flooding. And some of the best tools that we have right now is using the flood watch. One thing that is good about a flood watch is that it gives you a longer lead time. So it lets you know what the conditions are possible in the next 6 hours to maybe even 48 hours in advance. It does highlight a broader area of concern where we're expecting heavy rain and the potential of flooding. And there is maybe a 50% chance or more that it could develop. So it's kind of a broad area, but it gives you a heads up that the potential is there that we could see some flooding. And it gives you time to prepare. Now, warnings are issued for an event that's imminent or ongoing. They are very short fuse. They could give you a lead time of maybe a half an hour to an hour, and for a very small area. And one thing we do for any type of a flash flood warning is that they are accompanied by an emergency alert system. So you're going to get alarms and beeps on TV and radio stations. If you have a no weather radio that can pick up a transmission, that will alert as well. And we also have the capability to highlight those very considerable types of events with a wireless emergency alert, which would make cell phones ring and beep as well. But keep in mind, when a warning is issued, that the possibility of flooding or debris flows already happening is possible. So you may get the warning and it's already happening. And also in some of the areas in Okanagan County, we are well aware of the limitations of the cell service and the no weather radio service. So that may be a hindrance as well. Now here is a graph that shows a number of flash flood warnings and reports that were received from the National Weather Service Spokane over the last 10 years. And it's important to point out the cycle of these events ebbs and flows through the years. Sometimes we have very active years with a lot of events, from thunderstorms to heavy rain events, or a lot of burn scars that we're keeping track of. and other years aren't quite as active. So you can see back in 2015, 2014, those were some big busy years. Also 2019, and things kind of slowed off the last couple of years, but I anticipate with the number of burn scars we have in our area that those numbers will probably be increasing in the years to come. So I want to point out just recently with some of this wet weather that we've had in our area, I want to talk about after the recent active fire season, we're keeping our sights on heavy rain events. And we've had a lot of wet weather last several weeks. And this is normal for this time of the year, but it seems a little abnormal since we've had such a long stretch of dry weather. So I just want to point out some, this is a map that shows rainfall amounts from the last big event that we had over on Sunday. And these are 24-hour rainfall reports. And we had some hefty totals in the area. Some areas were over an inch, inch and a half that were in the Winthrop and Mazama area. We also had some reports of an inch and a half to almost 2 inches as well near Concanelli. Some of these, what just really stands out is this was away from the Cascade Crest, which we typically see a lot heavier amounts with that. So it just shows the diversity with precipitation patterns and where these heavy bands can line up. That wouldn't be as what we would typically think. But I want to report that at this time, we have not received much in the way of reports of flooding, despite these large rain totals that we have received. So we are now going into another rain event, starting actually overnight tonight through the day on Thursday and then tapering off Thursday night. And we are expecting another round of some moderate rain. We could see rainfall amounts of near 3 inches up by Rainy Pass and Washington Pass to maybe close to an inch around Winthrop within the next 24 hours. But in addition, we also message other types of weather events as well, along with the threat of snow. And we are also going to be anticipating some snow levels dipping down to about 4,500 to 5,000 feet. So at Washington Pass, we may see more in the way of snow than rain, and many of those higher elevations around the Cedar Creek burn area as well. So I want to just let you know, share with you some of the tools that the National Weather Service uses to monitor the heavy precipitation. We have our weather radar, which is based right in Spokane, and we are aware of its benefits and its limitations. It works very well with thunderstorms events, maybe not quite as well with these steady rain events that we see in the fall, but we also have other tools that we use, including our weather satellites that give us some high resolution images, which also can track lightning as well. And then we have our network of rain gauges. Some of them are permanent and some of them are emergency alert install ones that date back to about 2014. And they give us some very detailed rainfall information, which can be very useful to finding those high intensity rainfall areas. And we're also looking at the possibility of maybe moving, reshuffling some of them around in the months to come to kind of cover some of these high susceptible areas. And in addition, we have a network of weather volunteers, our weather spotters, our CoCoRaHS observers that give us reports of rainfall and reports of any flooding that's going on into the area. And they provide us the ground truth of what's happening, along with severe as well. And I just want to point out, we're always looking for new recruits. And also, if you have any type of weather events that happen in your area, on your property, please share your reports. Pass them on to the county emergency manager or to Craig or to somebody so we can get that information flowing so we can keep track to know what is going on in the area and what the areas are that are more susceptible. So to point out, as I said, our best chance of getting weather and warning information is from the National Weather Service webpage, which is at weather.gov/Spokane. And I want to point out some really key features that you can find some important weather information. First of all, you're going to get an image right on the front that shows what some of the risks are that we're looking for in the short term for weather events. But if you click on the current conditions tab, you will get a way to show the observations that can give you some of that rainfall total data that I was showing you. And also an image of how much rain has fallen in a graphical image that can give you an idea of where the heaviest rain has fallen, along with where the current radar data is showing information as well. In addition, on our webpage, we have a point and click map that you can scroll down and click on a location, let's say Winthrop. And then from there, you can get a detailed forecast that shows the forecast for the next 7 days. And you can feel free at clicking in different locations and you get a forecast for that location. So which would be really key to showing you where snow levels are and where some of the heaviest rain is in the region. Also, you can get a lot of this weather information and forecast right from your phone. You can go to the site called mobile.weather.gov and you can put in your forecast location. So let's say Winthrop, and you hit the go button and then it pops up the forecast right on your phone. And then you can simply add it to your home screen for quick access to return to have a National Weather Service app to view this information. And lastly, I just want to stress some safety rules with heavy rain and flooding. As Joe pointed out, it's really important to be prepared, play it safe right now. And if you reside near or below a burn scar, it's really important to stay informed on the weather, especially before and during a potential event. You can follow our National Weather Service website. We're also active on social media as well with Facebook and Twitter, and with NOAA Weather Radio as well. It's important to have a plan, have a kit packed, and don't wait for the warning to go out before you have to evacuate when heavy rain does develop. And also, if there is any flooding in the area, keep in mind that you don't want to be driving through any flooded roadways, and be very cautious at night when it's hard to see and recognize the dangers of flooding. So this concludes my portion of the presentation. I want to thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out at robin.fox@noaa.gov and our office email, which is nws.spokane@noaa.gov. And I'll be happy to answer any questions at the end of the presentation.
Thanks, Robin. Appreciate that information. That was fabulous. Our next presenter is Scott Van Hoff from FEMA, and I'll turn it over to Scott. Take it away.
Okay, thank you. Share my screen here real quick. I'm going to show you just a few slides. I just want to talk to you for just a few minutes here as we're running up at the end of our time here. Just want to talk to you about flood insurance from the National Flood Insurance Program and a little bit about flood after fire risk. Now, it's important to understand that after a fire, the ground, the lack of vegetation, the soil conditions, and the runoff potential from any watershed that's been burned, especially severely burned, represents a pretty significant change in conditions for that watershed. And if you are looking at a flood insurance rate map for your area, you need to understand that that represents normal conditions, pre-fire conditions. So your flood risk after a fire, especially a significant wildfire, the flood risk is greatly increased. And so that flood insurance rate map really isn't as valid as it was the day it was made, because the runoff potential and the flood flows certainly are going to be different. There's a potential for them to be significantly greater. So just because you live, your house might be located outside of a high hazard flood zone as shown on a flood insurance rate map, don't interpret that as any any kind of indication of flood safety, especially after a fire. And these conditions last for a few years after the fire. It's, until the vegetation and soil conditions have recovered to more closely match what the pre-fire conditions were. And that could take some time. Can be up to 5 years. Some places can be more. Again, it depends on the local climate and how quickly that watershed recovers. It doesn't take a lot of flooding to do some significant damage to your home. A couple of inches in a typical home can easily be $20,000, $30,000 of damage or more. The average American doesn't usually have that much sitting in an emergency reserve ready to pay your own way towards recovering from that kind of flood. Flood insurance might be the solution that you need to financially prepare or mitigate against this kind of a risk. Again, as I mentioned, just because your house is not in a flood zone doesn't mean you can't experience some kind of significant flooding. In fact, nationwide, our own insurance claim statistics show that around 20% of all of our claims are for properties that are outside that flood zone shown on that map, on the FEMA maps. So some important things to consider when you're thinking about flood insurance and shopping for flood insurance. It's important to understand what the policy will cover. So now I'm talking about a national flood insurance program policy. You should be aware that there are private flood policies available out there that you could get. So when you're having a conversation with your agent, it's important to understand what kind of policy you're talking about and what the definitions are of that policy. In other words, what does it actually cover? What event triggers payment on that insurance policy? Now, it's important to understand that with the National Flood Insurance Program, the definition of a flood is just a general temporary condition of flooding, surface water flooding from a riverine source or heavy rainfall or from a mud flow. Our policies specifically cite mud flow as a covered peril. And that general condition of flooding needs to cover 2 or more acres in size or impact 2 or more parcels, one of which is your parcel, and then the neighboring parcel, like could be the street out in front of your house. That's a different parcel owned by somebody else, the city or the county. And if your flood event is a mud flow, it's important to understand what is a mud flow. And there's a lot of misunderstanding of what constitutes a mud flow. So it's important, again, to read the definition. So the National Flood Insurance Program, their standard flood insurance policy, specifically cites this definition of a river of liquid and flowing mud. In other words, the important thing here is it's flowing and it's liquid. So it flows like water. Other earth movements, such as a landslide, slope failure, or soil mass movement, are not mud flows, and they are not covered by the National Flood Insurance Program. So in other words, a mud flow looks like water, flows like water. It's mostly water. It has some soil in it, so it's obviously very dirty water, but it's still flowing with a behavior like water. Debris flows and landslides are mostly soil with just enough water to mobilize them and get them to move down slope. It's important to understand that debris flows and landslides are not covered by the National Flood Insurance Program. And so if you were looking at any other kind of policy, again, like a private policy, it's important to read their definitions and understand what kind of perils are covered and how they define those. How would they define a mud flow if they cover a mud flow? Now, if you want to get more information, FEMA certainly has a considerable amount of information available on our website. The first place I'd suggest you go to look is floodsmart.gov. And you'll see a lot of these references right here are actually from a webpage called agents.floodsmart.gov. It's the same website, just for flood insurance agents, but please feel free to go there. You're going to find a lot of information about flood after fire, about flood insurance, and even definitions and descriptions of what, again, mud flows are. Certainly, I have a lot of experience seeing the after effects of mud flows from burn scar areas. They're unfortunately quite common. You don't even have to be anywhere near a flood zone to experience, a mud flow coming off of a burn scar. I've seen plenty of examples here in Washington State from previous years. Over the last 5, we've had some pretty significant fires. So if there's a significant burn scar upslope of your home, it's something you might want to consider is insuring yourself against that loss. And again, if you want to obtain flood insurance or get a quote, find out how much it costs, just contact any licensed flood insurance agent here in the state of Washington, and they could give you a quote on FEMA's flood insurance program. And if you have any other further questions, you can always contact me as a resource for information or about flood after fire or just flood insurance in general. Again, I'm here in the Region 10 area or in Seattle metro areas where I live, and all of Washington State is part of my area. So be happy to take any questions anybody has.
Thanks, Scott. All right, we are at that time on the agenda where it is open for questions and answers. I would ask that you just raise your hand if you want to ask a question, and then I'll call on you so we can kind of try and keep people from talking over each other too much. And we'll call on folks as fast as we can get questions answered. So if you have any questions, just raise your hand. There's a little logo at the top of the page that has a little hand over a face icon. If you click that, then one of the options is kind of a high five hand that sticks up. You put that, and we'll see who wants to ask a question. So, all right, Denny Weston, go ahead.
First of all, thank you so much for the information. It's been very, very helpful. I appreciate the time and effort that went into it. I'm at the base of Lucky Jim Bluff, and we had pretty severe fires up here. It's pretty scarred. I was kind of surprised not to see it as mentioned or listed as an area that had a potential problem with flooding or debris flow. And has that been, I thought I heard that originally it was thought to, and now it's not showing up. Any observations about that?
I'm going to let Joe answer that one.
Sure. So just to make sure that I understand, what was the specific site?
We're at the base of Lucky Jim Bluff, actually between the base of the bluff and Cum Road, and was a significant fire area and a very, very steep inclined area behind us. So we're kind of concerned that there might be an issue with that.
Okay. I'm not sure, was that one of the areas that I showed for the assessment?
It was not the area, but in prior conversations with others and reading the news, Lucky Jim Bluff was considered a really risky area. I guess perhaps that's changed.
Well, I can only tell you from the areas that I assessed, and from the sounds of that, Lucky Jim Bluff was not included with our assessment, but I can definitely go back and take a look at that area and be able to get back to you.
I would appreciate that so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that question, Denny. We had a question in the chat for those of you that have called in. The question was, if you're not eligible for EWP, does that mean you're not eligible for flood insurance? And that is not the case. Eligibility for EWP has no bearing whatsoever on eligibility for flood insurance. Okay. Any other questions? All right, Lincoln, please go ahead.
I've unmuted. Given the current storm that's coming in and will be active tomorrow, if a significant amount of that precipitation is as snow, doesn't that decrease the risk?
It's an excellent question. Robin or Joe?
Yes, I can answer that. Yes, what we're going to be seeing with the snow that's going to be coming overnight into the morning hours, that would decrease the risk, although those snow levels are going to be going up pretty rapidly during tomorrow morning. So that we'll see most of it coming as rain then for the rest of the day. So we could see a decreased threat initially, but things are going to be warming up as we go through the day.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Robin. One thing that I do want to kind of make sure that is clear is that even though that there aren't maybe areas that are eligible for EWP, or specific properties or whatever, it doesn't mean that there is absolutely no risk. And that's a big part of the reason why Joe and I and Robin and Scott and others wanted to make sure that we had this meeting was, we're not trying to scare people. We don't want to make you fearful to be in your homes or whatever. We just want to make sure that you're informed, especially due to the fire. You are likely to see an increase in the amount of water that is definitely coming down stream channels. And if, given the right hydrologic conditions, which is always, kind of that, it's the roll of the dice on the craps table kind of thing. You never know just exactly how big a storm will be or how intense it will be. But it definitely could make water come out of the channel and come across the ground, and so it could get it could be definitely an impact to your property. So we just want people to be aware and be heads up and watching those forecasts like Robin said, and seek some flood insurance if you feel that's right for you. And get some assistance that way. So, all right. So so there was a question about how much does flood insurance generally cost. Somebody quoted said that they got a quote ranging from $800 to $1,900 a year. So,
You want me to take that question?
Yeah, please do.
Yes. The cost of flood insurance varies tremendously. FEMA recently implemented a new rating methodology, just started October 1st, so it's a brand new system, where we've done away with our old system of aggregating properties by nationwide zones, and now we do very much an individualized assessment of flood risk on each individual structure to determine what the cost of insurance is. So we look at a number of factors, such as what's the distance of your house to the flood source or sources. So we're going to be looking at mapped sources, such as the river or a lake. So I mean, if you're far up a slope and on a hillside but below a burn scar, you might end up with some pretty low cost insurance because some of the traditional rating factors for flooding might be pretty minor for your property. We also look at things like what's the elevation of your house relative to the flooding source, what's the elevation of your house off the ground, what's its construction type, is it frame or is it masonry construction, and your foundation type is important as well. Is your foundation kind of a high foundation or you slab on grade? And then in flood insurance now, the cost and the coverage now is based on replacement cost value. So if you have a more valuable home, it'll cost more to cover it. But you have a lot of flexibility in affecting your own premiums by choosing your coverage amount and choosing your deductible amount as well. So flood insurance can be as low as maybe $400 or $500. Certainly some high risk properties can be well over $1,000, but again, it requires that individual risk assessment of your specific property. And your flood insurance agent, your insurance agent can get you that quote and then show you what those rating factors are for your house and how they arrived at that final price.
All right. Thank you. Gregory, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I believe I heard that Joe's slides will be available on one of the homes on the Thompson Creek on Mugo Road. And And it might be nice to look at the pre and post, flood visual and the numbers that he calculated for it.
All right. Yeah, I'll work with Joe and see if we can't get those posted along with the recording of this meeting through the Okanagan County Emergency Management website.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Real quickly, I had somebody send me a comment. That one thing to also consider is even if your home may not be necessarily at risk, your driveway or the county road or whatever that you use to access town and other services could potentially be impacted. So, if you know that there's storm events or whatever coming in, you might want to, think about just being prepared, having some bottled water around and things like that, or maybe even potentially even evacuating ahead of time. Just in case you do get potentially cut off. Those are very situational and of course highly dependent upon the type and severity of a storm that might come. So with that, next I think we have Lincoln, and then Steve Devon is after that.
Quick question. We live on an alluvial fan from Little Boulder Creek, and I'm trying to figure out if a debris flow were to hit and it's not covered by flood insurance, which we have, what type of insurance does cover debris flows?
Scott?
Yeah, well, that's commonly referred to as landslide insurance coverage. That it is difficult to find. I certainly have a lot of interest or inquiries about that from our friends up in Alaska, many of whom live in landslide hazard zones. And I hear reports from them that it's difficult to find companies that offer landslide coverage. An earthquake policy, typically those don't cover it because earthquakes cover specifically earthquakes and not any other form of land movement like landslides. And in fact, the earthquake policy I used to have even specifically said landslides not covered. One kind of policy that often will cover that is kind of an umbrella catastrophic policy. It's often referred to as a change in conditions policy, where essentially anything that causes change of conditions in your structure, the policy will cover that. And it's a catastrophic policy. There are a few companies that sell it. It's typically, only used in commercial applications, but it's not unheard of for residential structures. So you might have to shop around a bit and call a few different insurance agencies to find one that offers that kind of a policy, but they are somewhat rare.
All right. Thank you, Lincoln. Steve, you're next.
I guess this question is for Joe. On the profiles that you did on the assessment areas, does that final assessment of the assessment area, is that determined by those profiles that you did, or can you do profiles in other areas that change the risk factor?
Yes, I can do profiles at other areas. The ones that I indicated were the ones that had the highest potential risk. So I didn't do every residence that may be impacted within a particular flood map. But just because I didn't happen to show it does not mean that there is not a potential for flooding there, although basically I looked at the worst case scenario to see if that would be eligible for our program requirements.
So your profiles that you took were in locations you thought were the worst situations in that area?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And if there are any questions, if someone wanted to have a more specific, it's possible for us to look at other ones. But like I said, we looked at the most significant within a particular area.
All right.
I went further, Joe. Did anybody, did you or anybody, I was wondering from the team, there was some mention of visiting the sites. Did anybody go up into the Little Boulder Creek Basin at all to view that, or?
The Forest Service Bear team went up and did assessments throughout the area on the Forest Service property. And I believe Trevor is on, and he was also with the DNR. And I believe Trevor was up in the area. I'm not sure if he went to that specific area. I did not look into that specific area there. I relied on information from other individuals who did see it.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Steve. Gregory?
No, I didn't have another question. Maybe I hit it twice.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. No problem. Are there any other questions? Oh, Lincoln.
I have no more questions.
Oh, okay. It keeps popping up back here with some of you with your hands up. Thought they'd cleared out, but that's okay. Anybody else? Okay. Well, thank you all. I really appreciate you all taking the time to listen to these presentations. Like I said, the recording will be hopefully posted in the next day or two on the Okanagan County Emergency Management website. I'll be working with Maurice Goodall on that, and I'll see if I can't get a copy of Joe's slides and try to get those posted as well. So I again appreciate you all joining us tonight, and I wish you all a great evening. Thank you.